The heavy oak door slammed shut with a boom that echoed like a thunderclap through the royal wing. I gasped, my back hitting the cold wood as the lock clicked into place. Outside, the entire kingdom was already in chaos. Moments ago, the sky had turned a deep, bruised purple, and the ground had groaned as if the earth itself were breaking. I could still hear the distant, terrifying howls of 1,000 wolves, a sound of pure agony and bloodlust that made my skin crawl. And it was all because of what he saw. Alpha King Silas stood before me, his towering frame blotting out the light. He wasn't the calm, cold ruler the pack feared. He was something far more dangerous. His eyes, usually a piercing silver, had bled into a thick, glowing crimson. His claws were unsheathed, digging into the velvet wallpaper, and the scent of burnt ozone and wild forest filled the room. "Silas, please," I whispered, my voice trembling. It wasn't what it looked like. He stepped into my space, his heat radiating off him like a furnace. He slammed his hand against the door inches from my head. "I saw him touch you, Alara. I saw his lips on yours." As he spoke, a low growl vibrated in his chest, a sound so primal it made the windows rattle in their frames. The air in the room became heavy, making it hard to breathe. The most powerful man in the world, the king who had never bowed to anyone, looked like he was dying of a broken heart and burning with a rage that could level cities. He leaned down, his nose brushing against my neck, his breath hot against my skin. His voice was a dark, jagged shadow of itself. "I hired you to watch my children," he rasped, his grip tightening until the wood cracked. "But I think I'll keep you for myself, and if he ever looks at you again, I will tear the sun from the sky just to watch his world go dark." I froze. This was the man I had served in silence for a year. This was the man who was supposed to marry a high princess tomorrow. But as the kingdom screamed outside and the shadows danced in his red eyes, I realized the terrifying truth. The Alpha King wasn't just angry. He was claimed, and he was never letting me out of this room. Everything had been so quiet just a few hours ago. I was Alara, the girl with no family and no status, lucky enough to be the nanny to the two most important children in the kingdom, Leo and Mia. They were Silas's heart, his heirs, and the only reason I got to live within the safety of the royal palace. To the rest of the pack, I was a ghost. I moved through the halls in my simple gray dresses, keeping my head down, making sure the little ones were fed and happy. Silas was a man of stone. Since his first wife died in the Great War, he had shut everyone out. He was tall, with shoulders as broad as the ancient oaks in the Forbidden Forest and hair as black as a raven's wing. He ruled with an iron fist, and the mere sound of his boots on the stone floor made grown warriors tremble. I admired him from a distance, watching the way he looked at his children with a hidden, aching softness that he showed no one else. I loved him in secret, knowing a girl like me could never be a queen. But today was the mating eve. The palace was buzzing with noble wolves from every territory. Silas was expected to announce his union with Lady Sarah, a powerful warrior who would bring peace to the borders. I felt like my heart was being stepped on, but I did my job. I took the children to the gardens so they wouldn't see their father looking at another woman. That's when Jax found me. Jax was a lead guard, a man I thought was a friend. He knew I was sad. He cornered me near the rose bushes, talking about how Silas didn't deserve me. Before I could push him away, he grabbed my waist and pulled me into a kiss. It was cold. It felt wrong. I struggled to get away, my hands pushing against his chest, but in that second the world ended. The wind stopped blowing. The birds went silent. Then a roar ripped through the air, a sound so loud it felt like my ears would bleed. I looked up and saw Silas standing on the balcony above. He wasn't the king anymore. He was the beast. His power exploded outward in a wave of pure silver light, knocking the guards to their knees and causing the very trees to bend. Jax turned pale and fled, leaving me alone in the center of the storm. Silas didn't chase him. He didn't have to. His eyes were locked on mine, and in that moment I knew. The Invisible Nanny had finally been seen, and the Alpha King was coming to claim what he thought was stolen. He had leaped from the balcony, landing with the weight of a falling star, and dragged me toward the royal quarters while the sky turned red with his fury. Now inside the locked room, The silence was louder than the screams outside. Silas moved his hand from the door and cupped my cheek. His touch was electric, sending sparks through my blood that told me something my mind was too afraid to admit. My wolf, who had been silent for years, finally spoke. "Mate." The word echoed in my soul, sweet and terrifying. I looked into his red eyes, seeing the pain behind the rage. He was the king of the wolves, but right now, he looked like a man who had been starving and had finally found bread. "You're mine," he whispered, his forehead dropping to mine. "Do you understand? I don't care about the laws, I don't care about the ceremony. If I can't have you, I'll let this whole kingdom burn to ashes." Just then, a frantic pounding started on the door. It was the High Elder, his voice high and panicked. "My king, the borders are being attacked. The people are rioting. You must come out and finish the ceremony with Lady Sarah." Silas didn't move. He didn't even look at the door. He just stared at my lips, his thumb brushing over them as if trying to wipe away the memory of the other man. "Tell them," Silas growled, his voice loud enough to pass through the thick wood, "that the king has found his queen. And tell Sarah if she sets foot in this hallway, I'll banish her family to the wastelands." There was a gasp from the other side of the door, followed by a heavy silence. My heart hammered against my ribs. He was choosing me. He was throwing away peace, politics, and his reputation for a nanny. But then the floor shook again, not from Silas's power this time. A dark, cold energy seeped under the door, smelling of rot and ancient magic. The shadows in the corner of the room began to twist and grow, forming the shape of a wolf made of smoke. Silas stiffened, his wolf pushing to the surface. He shoved me behind his back, his body shielding me completely. "They're here," he hissed, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. "Who?" I asked, clutching his shirt. "The ones who killed my father," he said, his eyes glowing brighter. "And they aren't here for the throne, Alara. They're here for you." Before I could ask why, the heavy oak door didn't just open. It exploded inward, and the lights in the room went pitch black. The darkness was absolute, thick like ink and smelling of old graves. I couldn't see Silas, but I could feel the roar that tore from his throat. It wasn't human. It was the sound of a god in pain. The air pressure in the room spiked, and suddenly a burst of silver light exploded from his body, acting like a flare in the night. In that flash of light, I saw them. 3 figures stood in the shattered doorway. They weren't wolves, not exactly. They looked like men, but their skin was gray and translucent, and their eyes were hollow pits of violet fire. Behind them, the smoke wolf I had seen in the corner lunged. "Alara, run to the nursery," Silas commanded. His shirt ripped as his muscles expanded, his bones cracking and snapping as he began the partial shift. His claws grew into obsidian blades. "I'm not leaving you," I cried, but the choice was taken from me. One of the gray figures moved with a speed that defied nature. He didn't go for Silas, he moved like a blur toward me. Silas intercepted him midair, their bodies colliding with a force that cracked the stone floor. They tumbled across the room, a blur of fur, teeth, and violet sparks. The other 2 figures stepped toward me, their hollow eyes fixed on my chest, right where my heart was beating like a trapped bird. "The healer's blood," one of them hissed, his voice sounding like dry leaves skittering on a tombstone. "The king has been hiding the cure in his own nursery." I backed away until my heels hit the balcony railing. The cold night air whipped my hair around my face. Below, the palace gardens were a war zone. I could see Lady Sarah leading a group of warriors, but they weren't fighting the gray intruders. They were fighting Silas's loyal guards. Betrayal. The word tasted like copper in my mouth. "Silas," I screamed. He threw the gray creature off him, its body slamming into a marble pillar and shattering it. He turned to me, his face half shifted, a terrifying mask of a wolf. But when he saw the 2 figures closing in on me, his expression turned into pure, raw terror. "Don't touch her," he bellowed. He didn't run, he leaped. But as he was in the air, the smoke wolf from the shadows solidified into a massive, dark beast and tackled him from the side, pinning the king to the ground. Silas struggled, his massive strength failing against the magical weight of the shadow creature. One of the gray men reached out a cold, clammy hand and gripped my throat. I couldn't breathe. The world began to spin. "Such a small thing to hold the power of the moon," the creature whispered. He pulled a jagged dagger made of purple glass from his cloak. "With your heart, the shadow pack will never die." "Let her go." Silas's voice was a broken sob of rage. He was shifting fully now, his massive black wolf form emerging, but the shadow beast was choking him, draining his light. I looked at Silas one last time. I saw the tears in his wolf's eyes. I saw the love that he had hidden behind his cold exterior for a year. And in that moment of death, my fear vanished. Something deep inside me, something that had been asleep since I was a baby, snapped open. My blood began to hum. It wasn't a sound. It was a golden vibration. A blinding light, warmer than the sun and whiter than the moon, erupted from my chest. It hit the gray creature, and he didn't just fall. He disintegrated into ash instantly. The light expanded, washing over the room. The shadow beast pinning Silas shrieked and evaporated into mist. The force of the blast threw me backward, over the railing. I felt the rush of air. I felt the drop. I closed my eyes, waiting for the impact of the stone gardens below, but the impact never came. Massive, fur-covered arms caught me in midair. Silas, in his full black wolf form, a beast the size of a small carriage, had leaped over the balcony after me. We landed hard on the grass, his body taking the entire brunt of the fall. He shifted back to his human form instantly, ignoring his own broken ribs and bleeding skin. He gathered me into his arms, crushing me to his chest as he sobbed into my hair. I have you," he choked out. Around us, the fighting stopped. The warriors, including Lady Sarah, stared at us in shock. The golden glow hadn't fully faded from my skin. I was shining in the darkness like a fallen star. Lady Sarah stepped forward, her sword drawn. "She's a witch, I told you, Silas. She used her spells to bewitch you and the children. Kill her now and save the pack." Silas stood up slowly, keeping one arm firmly around my waist. He looked at the woman he was supposed to marry, then at the elders who were gathering with narrowed eyes. The king pulled me closer, his voice echoing across the entire moonlit garden, cold enough to freeze the blood of every wolf listening. "She is not a witch," Silas growled. "She is the moon healer, the one the prophecies said would return to lead us. And if any of you move 1 inch closer to my mate, you won't have to worry about the shadow pack, because I will kill you myself." Lady Sarah's face twisted in hate. "Your mate, she is a servant, a girl with no name." "She is your queen," Silas roared, his power flaring out so strongly that everyone in the garden was forced to their knees. But as the pack bowed in fear, a high-pitched scream came from the palace. "Daddy, Alara." It was Mia's voice. I looked up at the nursery window. My heart stopped. A gray figure was standing on the ledge, holding the small, sobbing girl over the edge. In his other hand, he held Leo by the scruff of his shirt. "The king chooses the girl," the creature shouted down, his violet eyes glowing with malice. "So the shadows will take the heirs." Silas went deathly still. The power around him vanished, replaced by an agonizing silence. The man who would burn the world for me was now looking at his children about to be dropped to their deaths. The creature looked at me and grinned, revealing rows of needle teeth. "Come to us, healer. Give yourself up, or the bloodline ends tonight." Silas's grip on my hand tightened until it hurt. I looked at him, and I saw the impossible choice in his eyes. He couldn't lose his children. He couldn't lose his mate. I leaned in and kissed his cheek, my voice a whisper. "Take care of them, Silas. I love you." Before he could stop me, I stepped out of his reach. Thank you so much for watching Chapter 3 of this epic story. If you're enjoying the romance and the mystery of the Moon Healer, don't forget to give this video a like. It really helps the channel grow. Also, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a chapter. Do you think Alara should sacrifice herself for the children? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I walked toward the center of the garden, my hands raised. "Let them go. I'm the one you want. Just put the children down." The gray creature laughed, a sound like glass breaking. He tossed Leo back into the room roughly, but he kept his grip on Mia, dangling her over the long drop. "Walk into the shadows, healer. Don't make me ask again." I stepped into the dark circle of mist forming on the grass. Silas let out a haunting howl of despair, his guards holding him back as he tried to rush to me. He knew that if I entered that mist, I was going to a place from which no one returned. As the cold shadows began to wrap around my ankles, pulling me down into the earth, I looked up at Mia. "Close your eyes, sweetie," I whispered. The shadow pulled me under. The last thing I saw was Silas's face, contorted in a scream of pure, unbridled agony as the ground swallowed me whole. I was in the dark again, but this time I wasn't alone. Thousands of violet eyes opened in the gloom around me. "Welcome home, little light," a voice boomed. "We've been waiting 1,000 years to put you out." The ground above me felt miles away. I was in the heart of the Shadow Pack's territory, the cursed lands where no wolf could survive. I was a prisoner, and Silas was a king with a broken heart and a kingdom in ruins. But they forgot one thing. I wasn't just a nanny anymore. And Silas, he wasn't just an alpha. He was a man who had finally found something to live for. I felt a spark of gold in my palm. "Wait for me, Silas," I thought. Suddenly, the wall of the cavern exploded. Through the dust and rubble, a massive black wolf charged through the fire, his eyes burning with a red light that made the shadows scream in terror. He didn't come with an army. He came alone. Silas had tracked me into the abyss, and he looked ready to tear the underworld apart to get me back. But as he reached me, he stopped. Standing between us was a man who looked exactly like Silas, but older, with a crown of bones on his head. "Hello, son," the dead king whispered, drawing a sword of shadow. "I see you've brought me a gift." Silas shifted, his chest heaving, his eyes wide. "Father." The betrayal wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Silas stood frozen, his wolf retreating just enough to let the shock register on his human face. The man standing before us was King Valerius, Silas's father, the man the entire kingdom believed had been murdered by the Shadow Pack 20 years ago. But he didn't look like a hero returned from the grave. He looked like a nightmare. His skin was the color of wood ash, and his eyes weren't silver like Silas's. They were the same hollow violet fire as the creatures that had snatched me. "You're alive," Silas breathed, his voice cracking. "We mourned you. I built a monument to your name." Valerius laughed, and the sound made my teeth ache. "I didn't die, Silas, I ascended. I realized that the light of the moon is a lie told to keep wolves weak. True power is in the darkness that eats the light." He turned his gaze to me, and I felt a cold slime crawl over my skin. "And now you've brought me the ultimate battery, the moon healer. With her heart, our pack will never have to hide in the cracks of the world again." Silas stepped in front of me, his roar shaking the cavern ceiling. "You will not touch her." "Still protecting the weak, my son," Valerius sighed, swinging his sword of shadows. "That was always your flaw. You loved too much. You loved your first wife, and it broke you when she died. Now you love this. Servant, let me show you what happens to things you love." With a flick of his wrist, Valerius sent a wave of purple energy toward us. Silas shifted instantly, his massive black wolf form absorbing the hit to protect me. He was thrown back against the stone wall with a sickening thud. "Silas!" I screamed. I ran to him, pressing my hands against his matted fur. My palms began to glow, the golden warmth flowing from my body into his to heal the cracked ribs and burned skin. "Stop," Silas gasped, shifting back to human form. He gripped my wrists, his eyes desperate. "Ilara, stop. Every time you use your power, they can track you. You're draining yourself." "I don't care," I sobbed. "I won't let you die." Valerius watched us with a twisted smile. "How touching. The healer gives her life for the beast. But tell me, Silas, did you tell her the truth about her parents? Or did you keep that secret to yourself so she would keep loving you?" I froze. My hands stayed on Silas's chest, but I looked up at him. Silas wouldn't look at me. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on his father. "Silas," I whispered, "what is he talking about?" "Ask him, little light," Valerius taunted. Ask the honorable king who really signed the execution order for the traitors of the Moon Forest. Ask him whose father gave the command to slaughter the healers so that no one could challenge the throne. The world felt like it was tilting. I looked at the man I loved, the man I had served, the man whose children I had raised. Silas, tell me he's lying. My parents were killed by rogues. You told me that when you hired me. Silas finally looked at me, and the guilt in his eyes was louder than any confession. Ilara, I didn't know it was them until long after you came to the palace. I was trying to protect you from the truth. You lied to me, I whispered, pulling my hands away from him as if his skin burned me. Every time I thanked you for giving me a home, you knew your family was the reason I didn't have one. It wasn't him, Silas shouted at his father, but his voice was full of agony. I was a child when it happened. But you kept the crown bought with their blood, Valerius reminded him. The pain of the betrayal was worse than the shadows. I looked at Silas, then at the monster who was his father. I was trapped between the man who lied to me and the man who wanted to kill me. But there was no time for tears. The violet eyes in the darkness began to move. Thousands of shadow wolves emerged from the tunnels, their low growls filling the cavern like a coming storm. They were closing in. Valerius raised his sword. Kill the king. Bring me the girl, alive. Silas stood up despite his injuries. He didn't look at me. He kept his back to me, acting as a shield one last time. Ilara, I know you hate me. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But please, when I charge, you run. There's a tunnel behind the main pillar. It leads to the surface. Silas, there are too many of them, I said, my heart breaking even as I was angry. Then I'll die making a path for you, he said simply. He turned his head just enough for me to see a single tear track through the blood on his face. I loved you before I knew who you were, and I love you enough to let you hate me as long as you're alive to do it. With a final, earth-shaking howl, Silas shifted into the largest wolf I had ever seen, a beast of pure shadow-black fur and silver-fire eyes. He lunged into the sea of violet-eyed monsters, a whirlwind of teeth and claws. I stood there for a split second, the path to the tunnel open. I could run. I could leave the liar and the monsters behind. But then I saw Silas disappear under a wave of 5, 10, 20 shadow wolves. I saw Valerius walking toward the pile with his sword raised, ready to end his own son's life. I looked at my hands. They were shaking. I thought about Leo and Mia waiting at home. I thought about the way Silas held me in the locked room. The anger was there, but the love was deeper. I didn't run for the tunnel. I ran toward the center of the fight. Get away from him, I screamed. I didn't just let the light out this time. I tore it open. I reached deep into the core of my soul, past the pain and the lies, and grabbed onto the ancient power of the moon itself. A pillar of pure, white gold fire erupted from me, hitting the ceiling of the cavern. The stone groaned and began to collapse. The light was so bright that the shadow wolves began to dissolve before they could even scream. Valerius shielded his eyes, hissing in pain as his gray skin began to crack. You fool! You'll bring the whole mountain down on us. Then we'll all die in the dark, I cried. The ceiling buckled. A massive boulder fell, separating me and Silas from Valerius. The cavern was falling apart. Silas, back in human form and covered in blood, crawled toward me. He grabbed my hand just as the ground beneath us gave way. We weren't falling into shadows this time. We were falling into a rushing underground river. The cold water swallowed us, pulling us into a dark tunnel at a terrifying speed. I felt Silas's arms wrap around me, holding my head above water even as we were smashed against the rocks. Then everything went quiet. I woke up on a muddy bank. The sun was just starting to rise, casting a pale pink light over a forest I didn't recognize. We were miles away from the palace, and miles away from the shadow cavern. Silas was lying next to me, unconscious. His breathing was shallow, and his chest was a mess of deep, jagged cuts from the shadowglass sword. Black veins were spreading from his wounds, poison. I knelt over him, my hands trembling. I could heal him, but I was so weak I could barely stand. And even if I saved him, What then? He was still the man who kept the secret of my parents' death. As I hesitated, a twig snapped in the woods behind me. I turned, expecting a shadow wolf, but instead it was Lady Sarah. She wasn't alone. She had a group of elite warriors with her, and they all had their crossbows aimed at my heart. "Well, well," Sarah sneered, stepping over a fallen log. "The little nanny and her pet king. You saved us a lot of trouble by escaping that hole, Ilara." "Sarah, he's dying," I said, pointing to Silas. "He needs help." "Oh, I know," she said, a cruel smile spreading across her face. "And once he's gone, I'll tell the pack that you killed him with your witchcraft. I'll be the hero who found his body and took out the traitor." She raised her hand to signal the archers. "Wait," I shouted. "I'll give you what you want. I'll give you the healer's power. Just let him live." Sarah paused, greed flashing in her eyes. "How can you give it to me?" "The blood oath," I said, my voice steady despite the terror. "I can transfer the bond to you, but you have to swear to take him back to the palace and heal him." Silas's eyes fluttered open. He grabbed my ankle, his voice a weak rasp. "No, Ilara, don't." I looked down at him, my heart breaking for the last time. "I have to, Silas. I'm just the nanny, remember. My job is to make sure you and the children are safe." I looked at Sarah and held out my hand. "Do we have a deal?" Sarah stepped forward, her dagger drawn to seal the oath, but she didn't see what I saw in the reflection of her blade. Behind her, in the shadows of the trees, thousands of pairs of violet eyes were watching. The shadow pack hadn't stayed in the cavern. They had followed the scent of my blood. The real war was just beginning, and I was about to make a deal with a devil while a demon watched from the trees. Sarah reached out, the tip of her dagger pressing against my palm. "A deal," she whispered, her eyes dancing with the thought of becoming the most powerful woman in history. "Give me the light and I'll give you his life." Silas let out a choked sound, a mix of a sob and a growl. "Ilara, please, don't give her your soul." I ignored him, keeping my eyes locked on Sarah. As our blood mingled on the blade, a faint golden spark flickered, but then the air turned freezing. The birds in the trees went dead silent. Sarah's warriors looked around, their bows shaking in their hands. "What is that?" one of the archers stammered, pointing into the dense tree line. The violet eyes didn't wait for an answer. With a sound like 1,000 dry bones snapping at once, the shadow pack erupted from the forest. They didn't target me or Silas first. They went for the warriors. It was a bloodbath. In the chaos, Sarah screamed, dropping the dagger as a massive shadow wolf lunged for her throat. She shifted into her brown wolf form just in time, snapping at the air, but she was outmatched. The noble warriors who had come to execute me were now being torn apart by the very darkness they had ignored. I scrambled backward, pulling Silas's heavy, limp body into the hollow of an ancient, white-barked tree. "Silas, stay with me," I begged. The black veins on his chest were reaching his neck. The poison from his father's blade was winning. He looked up at me, his silver eyes dulling, turning gray. "Run," he wheezed. "Ilara, take the kids. Get out." "I'm not leaving you to become one of them." I looked at his wounds. The only way to save him was to purge the shadow poison, but I was empty. I had given everything in the cavern. I looked at the carnage in the clearing. Sarah was pinned down, her warriors falling one by one. And standing at the edge of the woods was Valerius. He had followed us through the water. He looked at the chaos with a bored expression. His violet eyes fixed on me. "The deal is off, little healer," Valerius called out, stepping over a fallen body. "My son is a corpse and Sarah is a coward. Come here and end this gracefully." I looked at Silas's pale face. I thought about the lie. I thought about my parents. And then I looked at the way Silas was still trying to move his hand to cover mine, even as he was dying. He wasn't his father. He was the man who had kept me safe in a world that hated me. If the moon won't give me power, I thought, then I'll take it from the earth. I pressed my forehead against Silas's. "I forgive you," I whispered. "I forgive you for everything." The moment the words left my lips, something shifted. It wasn't the bright, burning light of the moon healer. It was something deeper, something ancient. The ground beneath the tree began to pulse. The roots of the white tree wrapped around my ankles, and for the first time I didn't feel like a servant or a nanny. I felt like the forest itself. A low, humming vibration started in my chest. I placed my hands directly over the black veins on Silas's heart. "Live," I commanded. I didn't push light into him. I pulled the darkness out. The black poison flowed into my own arms, stinging like liquid fire. I screamed as the shadow marks climbed up my skin, but I didn't let go. Silas's body jerked. His eyes snapped open, and the gray fog in them vanished, replaced by a silver fire so bright it was blinding. He roared, a sound that shook the very leaves from the trees. Silas stood up, his strength returned tenfold. He didn't even look like a man anymore. He looked like a god of war. He stepped out from the tree, his gaze landing on his father. "You should have stayed dead, old man," Silas said, his voice a tectonic rumble. But as Silas stepped forward to fight, I fell. The shadow poison I had pulled from him was cold, eating at my heart. My vision began to blur. "Ilara," Silas turned, catching me before I hit the dirt. "I'm okay," I lied, my voice a paper-thin whisper. "Just kill him, kill the shadows." Silas looked at the black marks on my arms, and a look of pure, unadulterated slaughter crossed his face. He turned toward Valerius, who was finally looking nervous. "You touched my mate," Silas said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was scarier than any roar. "You poisoned my queen. Now I'm going to show you why the wolves fear the night." Silas didn't just shift. He exploded into a form I had never seen in the history books. He was a Lycan, 10 feet tall, standing on 2 legs, covered in midnight fur, with silver armor seemingly made of moonlight shimmering on his skin. He moved like lightning. In 1 second, he was across the clearing. In the next, he had Valerius by the throat. The Shadow King tried to use his glass sword, but Silas snapped it in his bare hands like it was a twig. "This is for my mother," Silas growled, his claws sinking into Valerius's chest. "And this is for Ilara." With a sickening rip, Silas tore the violet heart from the Shadow King's chest. Valerius shrieked, his body turning into a cloud of ash that was immediately scattered by a sudden, clean wind. The shadow wolves in the forest let out a unified whimper and vanished into the trees, their master gone. Silence returned to the forest. The sun was fully up now. Sarah was lying in the dirt, unconscious but alive. Silas shifted back, his body trembling from the exertion. He ran to me, kneeling in the mud, his hands hovering over the black marks on my skin. "What did you do?" he cried, tears streaming down his face. "Ilara, you took the poison. Why did you take it?" "Because the pack needs a king," I whispered. My heart felt like it was slowing down. "And the children, they need their father." "They need a mother," he shouted. He grabbed my hands, trying to rub the black marks away. "Don't leave me. I'll give it all back. The throne, the kingdom, I don't care, just stay." I closed my eyes, the warmth of the sun feeling so far away. I was just the nanny. "No," Silas sobbed, pressing his lips to my forehead. "You are the soul of this pack. You are my mate. You are my queen." I felt a drop of his blood hit my hand, blood from his fight, mixed with the silver light of his Lycan form. Where his blood touched the black marks on my skin, the shadows sizzled and turned into gold. The marks began to change. They didn't disappear. They transformed into elegant, swirling golden tattoos that wrapped around my arms like royal sleeves. My heart gave a powerful, healthy thud. I opened my eyes. The poison was gone, replaced by a bond so strong I could feel Silas's every thought, every ounce of his love, and every bit of his guilt. He stared at me, breathless. You're glowing again." I sat up, looking at the golden marks on my skin. "I think the forest likes me, Silas." He laughed through his tears, pulling me into a kiss that tasted like survival and new beginnings. But as he pulled away, his face turned serious. He looked back toward the direction of the palace. "The elders will still try to fight us," he said. "Sarah will tell her lies. The kingdom is in pieces." I stood up, offering him my hand. I wasn't the shy girl in the gray dress anymore. I was the moon healer, and I had the king of wolves at my side. "Then let's go put the pieces back together," I said. "We have children to get home to." We started the long walk back toward the palace, but as we reached the edge of the royal territory, we saw something that made us stop. The palace was flying a black flag. "The funeral colors," Silas whispered, his face turning pale. "They think we're both dead." And standing at the gates, being crowned by the High Elder, was a man I had never seen before. A man with a cruel smile and eyes that looked exactly like the shadows we had just defeated. The war wasn't over. The real enemy was sitting on Silas's throne, and he was holding Leo and Mia by their hands. The king had returned, but his throne was occupied by a ghost. The black flag snapped in the wind, a mourning shroud over the home I had spent a year protecting. Beside me, Silas's growl was so low it made the pebbles on the path vibrate. His eyes were fixed on the balcony, the same balcony where this nightmare had started, where a stranger now stood with his hands resting on the shoulders of the two small, terrified children I loved. "Who is he?" I whispered, my heart breaking at the sight of Mia's tear-stained face. "Caspian," Silas hissed, his knuckles turning white. "My cousin. He was banished years ago for practicing the same dark arts my father fell to. The elders must have brought him back the moment they thought I was gone." As we watched, Caspian leaned down and whispered something into Leo's ear. The boy flinched, his small hands clenching the stone railing. That was all it took. The golden marks on my arms flared with a heat that matched the rage in my soul. No one touched my pups. "We can't just walk in," I said, grabbing Silas's arm before he could shift and charge the gate. "The elders have the pack convinced you're dead and I'm a traitor. If you show up as a monster, they'll use it as proof. We have to show them who the real monster is." Silas looked at me, the silver fire in his eyes softening just for a second. "You have a plan, my queen." "I'm still wearing the nanny's cloak," I said, pulling the hood over my head to hide the golden glow on my skin. "They expect a king to roar at the front gate. They don't expect a ghost to walk through the servants' entrance." The palace was eerily quiet as we slipped through the kitchens. The staff, people I had worked with for months, were huddled in corners, whispering in fear. I kept my head down, leading Silas through the secret passages I had discovered while playing hide-and-seek with the children. We reached the great hall just as the coronation ceremony began. The room was packed with hundreds of wolves. The air was thick with the scent of incense and the metallic tang of fear. "By the law of the bloodline," the High Elder shouted, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "Since King Silas has fallen and his heirs are underage, we crown Caspian as the regent protector of the North." Caspian stepped forward, the heavy gold crown of the alphas in his hands. He looked out at the crowd, a smirk playing on his lips. "I promise a new era," he declared. "No more hiding from the shadows. We will embrace the power that Silas was too weak to use." He raised the crown, but before it could touch his head, I stepped out from behind the velvet curtains. "The crown doesn't belong to a thief," I said, my voice clear and steady. The hall went silent, every head turned. Caspian froze, the crown hovering in the air. "The nanny," someone whispered. "The witch is alive." Caspian recovered quickly, his eyes narrowing. "Guards, seize her. She is the one who bewitched the king and led him to his death." 6 elite warriors lunged toward me. I didn't move. I didn't have to. The air in the room suddenly exploded with the scent of a thunderstorm. Silas stepped out from the shadows behind me, his presence so massive it seemed to shrink the entire hall. He didn't shift. He didn't roar. He just walked toward the throne, and the sheer weight of his alpha aura forced every wolf in the room to drop to their knees. The guards who were running toward me collapsed, their faces hitting the floor. "Silas," the High Elder gasped, his face turning gray. "But the reports, the shadow pack." "The shadow pack is gone," Silas growled, his voice echoing like rolling thunder. "And anyone who stood with my cousin while he held my children hostage will follow them into the dark." Caspian backed away, his hands shaking. "You're tainted, Silas. I can smell the shadow on you. You aren't fit to lead." "He isn't tainted," I said, walking to Silas's side. I pulled back my sleeves, revealing the glowing golden marks that pulsed in time with the moon. He was saved by the light of the moon healer, the light you've been trying to extinguish for 20 years. A murmur of awe ran through the pack. The legend of the moon healer was sacred, more important than any king. Caspian snarled, realizing he was losing the room. He didn't reach for a sword, he reached for the children. He grabbed Mia by the arm, his fingers turning into black claws. "If I can't have the throne, no one gets the heirs." Mia screamed. The golden marks on my arms didn't just glow, they erupted. I didn't think, I acted. A wave of pure, solid light shot from my hands, hitting Caspian squarely in the chest. It didn't kill him, but it acted like a cage, wrapping him in golden chains that burned against his dark skin. He dropped Mia, who scrambled toward me. I caught her in my arms, pulling her and Leo into a tight embrace as Silas lunged. He didn't need to shift to deal with Caspian. One punch, fueled by a father's rage, sent the usurper flying across the hall, through the stained glass windows, and into the courtyard below. Silas turned back to the room. The High Elder was trembling, the crown lying forgotten on the floor. Silas didn't pick it up. He walked to me, knelt down, and kissed the top of Mia and Leo's heads. Then he looked up at me, his eyes full of a devotion that made my heart ache. "The pack doesn't need a regent," Silas said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "And I don't need to be a king who rules alone. From this day forward, we are a pack of the moon, and this woman who saved your children and your king is your Luna." He picked up the crown, but he didn't put it on his own head. He held it out to me. "Alara," he whispered, "will you lead them with me?" I looked at the children, then at the wolves who had once treated me like a ghost. I saw Sarah in the back of the room, looking humbled and terrified. I saw the servants smiling through tears. I took the crown, but I didn't put it on. I placed it on the seat of the throne. "We don't need a crown to tell us who we are," I said. "We need a family." The roar that went up from the pack was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It wasn't a roar of war, it was a roar of home. But as the celebration began, I felt a sharp, cold prick at the back of my neck. I looked down at my golden marks. One tiny sliver of a vein was turning black again. I looked at Silas, who was laughing for the first time in years, and I kept my smile in place. The Shadow King was dead, but the poison I had taken from Silas, it wasn't finished with me yet. The celebration in the Great Hall was a blur of silver and gold, but to me, the world was starting to tilt. I could feel the coldness spreading from that one tiny black vein, a silent thief stealing the warmth Silas had just given back to me. Every time I breathed, it felt like inhaling frost. Silas pulled me into his arms, his heart beating strong and steady against my ear. "We did it, Alara," he whispered, his voice thick with relief. "The children are safe, you're home." I forced a smile, tucking my arm behind my back so he wouldn't see the golden light flickering like a dying candle. "Yes," I managed to say. "Home." But the shadows were patient. That night, after the children were tucked into their beds, Mia clutching her favorite stuffed wolf and Leo finally sleeping without a dagger under his pillow, I retreated to the balcony. The moon was full, a massive pearl in the sky, but for the first time in my life, its light felt distant. "You're hiding something." I jumped. Silas was standing in the doorway, his silhouette blocking the warmth of the hearth behind him. He didn't look like the victorious king now. He looked like the man who had lost everything once before and was terrified of history repeating itself. "I'm just tired, Silas," I said, leaning against the cold stone. He didn't say a word. He walked over, grabbed my hand, and gently but firmly pulled back the sleeve of my dress. The golden swirling marks were still there, beautiful and intricate, but at the very center of my wrist, a black line was pulsing like a second heartbeat. It was moving toward my palm. Silas's face went deathly pale. "The poison, I thought the bond broke it." "It changed it," I whispered. "But Valerius's blade was forged in the abyss, Silas. A soul for a soul. I took yours, and now the abyss is coming to collect." "No," he growled, his eyes flashing silver. "I won't allow it. We'll find a way. We have the royal library, the ancient scrolls." Sila's look at the sky, I interrupted. He looked up and his breath hitched. The moon wasn't white anymore. A thin, dark ring was forming around it, an eclipse that shouldn't be happening. The stars were winking out, one by one. He's not dead, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Your father. He didn't just want to kill us. He wanted to become the eclipse. He's not in the cavern anymore. He's in the bond. Suddenly, the ground groaned. A crack split the center of the courtyard below, and instead of dirt, a thick, violet mist began to pour out. The pack members who were sleeping in the barracks began to howl, not in celebration, but in a haunting, rhythmic chant. They weren't waking up as themselves. They were waking up with violet eyes. Silas grabbed his head, a groan of agony escaping his lips. I can hear him. Alara, he's inside my mind. The blood oath, I gasped, clutching my chest. When I pulled the poison from you, I connected us all. Valerius isn't fighting us from the outside anymore. He's using our own connection as a bridge. From the shadows of the hallway, a figure emerged. It was the High Elder, but his skin was gray and his mouth was stretched into a wide, unnatural grin. In his hand, he held a bowl of black liquid. The king must complete the sacrifice, the elder droned, his voice sounding like 1,000 whispering ghosts. The healer took the darkness, so the king must give the blood. Only then will the moon turn black forever. Silas lunged for the elder, but his body betrayed him. He fell to his knees, his muscles locking up. The black veins on my arm suddenly surged, reaching my shoulder. I fell beside him, my skin turning as cold as ice. Alara, Silas choked out, his hand reaching for mine. I have to go back, I whispered, the light in my eyes fading. Into the dark. If I stay here, I'm the bridge he's using to destroy the pack. Don't you dare, Silas said, his teeth gritted in pain. We fight together. But as the violet mist rose to the balcony, wrapping around us like a shroud, I saw the nursery door creak open. Leo stood there, rubbing his eyes, looking at the monsters we were becoming. Ilara, he whimpered. The darkness in my blood screamed for me to take him, to pull the boy into the shadows. My wolf fought back, but the poison was overwhelming. I looked at Silas, seeing the same struggle in his eyes. We were the greatest threat to the people we loved. I stood up, my body shaking. I didn't run to the children. I ran to the edge of the balcony. Ilara, no, Silas screamed, finding the strength to stand. I love you, Silas, I said, looking over the edge into the swirling violet abyss that had replaced the courtyard. Tell the pups I was more than just the nanny. I didn't wait for him to catch me. I jumped. But I didn't hit the ground. I fell into a world of nothingness, where the only sound was my father's laughter. Finally, the voice of Valerius boomed in the void. The light has come to the altar. I was standing in a temple made of bone, and in front of me was a mirror. But it wasn't my reflection staring back. It was a version of me with violet eyes and a crown of thorns. Give me the rest, the reflection whispered, and I'll let the alpha live. I reached out to touch the glass, my fingers trembling. This was the final betrayal, not from a king or a rival, but from my own blood. The glass was freezing, sending a jolt of static through my heart as my fingertips touched the reflection's cold, violet skin. You aren't me, I hissed, even as the black veins on my arm merged with the reflection in the mirror. I am the part of you that was tired of being a servant, the Shadowalera whispered, her voice a seductive caress. I am the part of you that hated the king for the blood on his family's hands. Why die for a pack that treated you like a ghost? Give me the light, Alara. Let the darkness take the pain away. As she spoke, the mirror began to ripple like water. I felt my soul being pulled forward, my very essence thinning as she drank from my golden light. But through the fog of the abyss, I heard a sound that didn't belong in this dead place. It was a heartbeat, not mine, not Valerius's. Some thump, some thump. It was the pack bond. It was Sila's. Suddenly, the bone temple shook. Above me, the violet sky cracked, and a streak of silver lightning tore through the void. A massive black paw smashed through the mirror, shattering the image of the Shadow Queen into a million jagged shards. Silas didn't just jump after me. He had used the mate bond as a tether, dragging his physical body into the spirit realm through sheer, stubborn will. He stood over the shards of the mirror, his Lycan form glowing with a fierce, protective aura. "You forgot one thing, Father," Silas roared into the void. "She isn't just a healer, she's my mate, and where she goes, I follow." He grabbed my hand, and the moment our skin touched, the black veins on my arms screamed. The golden marks flared with a blinding intensity. We weren't just two wolves anymore, we were a circuit of power. The light from my soul and the silver fire from his blood fused together, creating a force the abyss couldn't swallow. The temple of bone began to dissolve. Valerius appeared in the center of the room, his form flickering as he tried to hold the shadows together. "You're destroying yourselves," he shrieked. "No mortal can hold this much power." "Then we'll be legends," I cried out. I reached out my other hand toward the darkness, not to fight it, but to reclaim it. I realized then that the poison wasn't a curse, it was a test. The moon healer wasn't meant to just stay in the light, she was meant to bring balance to the dark. I pulled the violet mist into the golden swirl of my marks. I felt Silas's strength supporting me, his heartbeat giving me the rhythm I needed to stay conscious. Together, we acted like a vacuum, sucking the darkness out of the sky, out of the pack, and out of Valerius himself. "No, my power, my kingdom." Valerius vanished, his essence being purified and scattered into the stars. The world exploded in a silent flash of white. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the balcony of the palace. The sun was rising, but it wasn't the pale pink of before, it was a deep, vibrant gold. The black flag on the tower had been torn down by the wind, and in its place, the banner of the twin wolves was flying. Silas was beside me, his human hand gripping mine so tightly his knuckles were white. He looked exhausted, his hair disheveled and his chest covered in scratches, but he was breathing. "Ilara," he whispered, his eyes searching mine. I looked at my arms. The golden marks were still there, but they were no longer just swirls. They had formed the shape of two wolves running together, one of light, one of shadow. "I'm here, Silas," I said, my voice finally strong. "I'm not going anywhere." Below us in the courtyard, the pack was waking up. The violet eyes were gone. The wolves looked around in confusion, then up at the balcony. One by one, they began to howl, a song of victory, of healing, and of a new dawn. Leo and Mia ran onto the balcony, throwing themselves onto us. "You came back," Mia cried, burying her face in my neck. "I saw the light. You looked like a star, Ilara." Silas sat up, pulling us all into a massive hug. For the first time since I had stepped foot in this palace as a nameless nanny, the air felt clear. The secrets were gone. The shadows were balanced. But as I looked out over the ancient forest lands, I saw a single white wolf standing at the edge of the trees. It had no eyes, only stars where they should be. It bowed its head to me once, then vanished. The moon goddess had watched us, and she was satisfied. "Thank you so much for following this journey. If you loved the romance between Silas and Ilara, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell. I want to hear from you. What was your favorite moment? The locked door? The fight in the abyss? Comment below and let me know. Your support keeps these stories alive. Until next time, stay wild." I stood at Silas's side on the day of the true coronation. I wasn't wearing a nanny's apron or a servant's dress. I wore a gown of midnight blue, embroidered with the golden wolves of our bond. Silas took my hand, leading me to the edge of the dais. The High Elder, now free of the shadow's influence, stepped forward with 2 crowns. "To the king who braved the dark," the elder said, placing the silver crown on Silas's head. "And to the queen who brought the light," he continued, placing a delicate crown of golden leaves on mine. Silas turned to the thousands of wolves gathered below. He didn't speak of war or power. He looked at me, then at the children standing proudly beside us. "Today we don't just crown a king and queen," Silas announced, his voice carrying to the very borders of the kingdom. "Today we crown a family, the nanny who became a legend, the alpha who became a man. We are the pack of the rising moon." The roar that followed was the sound of 1,000 years of peace beginning. As we walked back into the palace, Silas leaned down and whispered into my ear, "So, my queen, what's our first royal decree?" I looked at the children, who were already plotting how to sneak extra dessert from the kitchens. "Actually," I smiled, "I think the children need a nap, and then, maybe the king and queen need some time behind a locked door." Silas laughed, his eyes sparkling with a heat that told me our story was just getting started. "As you wish, my love," he whispered. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I belonged. Not in the shadows, not just in the light, but right there, in the arms of my mate.